Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a twice-weekly podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from channel strategies to tariffs, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers, or what we call R-commerce. Now here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I am your host, Luke Peters, CEO of New Era Appliances and also CEO of Retail Band Digital Strategy Agency. We are now in a coronavirus world, and I know that's on everyone's mind, so I'm going to adapt all of these interviews to ensure that you, the listeners, are getting the most out of the Page One Podcast, so you can expect us to get right to the point. I've cut out my long introduction and hopefully give you valuable insights so you can focus on your businesses, with COVID-19 impacts, and it is impacting all of us. So quickly, we are offering a free evaluation of your online digital strategy for Retail Band. And if you're interested, email me at luke@retailband.com. And now more than ever, it's important to be strong on the digital side. We're talking about selling into Home Depot and Wayfair, Walmart and Amazon and all of those other online channels. In this episode, you're going to learn from JP Persico, and you're going to learn how he innovates and markets and launches new SKUs with Bosch in the automotive sector. JP is a leading corporate development and strategy individual in the automotive aftermarket industry division of Bosch North America. And he's going to bring a lot of innovative thinking to this podcast. JP, welcome to the podcast. And if you don't mind, why don't you start with a brief introduction?
Thanks for having me, Luke. Sure. I've been in the States for 10 years now. I'm originally from Switzerland. I was always in digital transformation, digital strategy. Right after college, I started at a company who looked at sales, how they were done at that time in a more like physical, bringing your binder with way, and how we could transform it onto a digitalization platform, which at that time, when the iPad 1 was launched, was our medium to really go out of sales forces and say like, hey, go away from paper, bring it to the digital space, which then led me to join Bosch and help them going down the road of really finding new ways and how we can approach our customers and becoming a company which is enabled through digital transformation and builds new products which are outside of the gimmick of the hardware and more into a software space.
Great. And JP, maybe in more of a tangible form, before we kind of dive into this interview, or maybe to start this interview, can you give us like maybe an example or briefly describe better for the audience in a tangible way what you're doing? Would there maybe be, a product example or kind of how you think about and innovate?
Sure. I think I'll bring it down to the term of going to a dentist. If you think about your vehicle, it's always when your vehicle has a problem, it's like you yourself going to a dentist. And some people have a lot of fear going to the dentist. And they have fear because of pain, they have also fear of what the bill is at the end of the day. And that's the same with vehicles. So we are trying to completely transform how you experience a vehicle maintenance. It should not be like a dentist visit. It actually should be like booking a trip on a leading platform out there where you can do everything with a couple of clicks, and then you get your credit card and you have a great experience coming up. At the end of the day, the automobile is a workhorse for us, and it has to fulfill lots of tasks. So we want to make sure that this workhorse is well taken care of, and it's taken care of with the most current and best technology there available. And that's what we are trying to do. So we're trying to transform that journey as you as a customer have to go for every single time you have your vehicle taken care of, to become more of a journey of joy and less of a journey of pain.
Wow, that's great. And I can relate, and not that I want to jump into this, but I worked on cars all the time as a kid, rebuilt motors, rebuilt pretty much everything, even worked at a transmission shop and did not rebuild the transmission. I think it's literally more difficult than a motor in for a lot of reasons. But, I got to tell you, you guys, you may be working on a different area, but just, your answer there was interesting, making the experience a lot easier. And I got to tell you, on a Yukon XL that we brought in just to a local shop, I was amazed actually at how they had diagnosed a power leakage, which ended up being a sensor on the brake pedal that was slowly draining the battery. And I know they can do this, because now they have computers in there. But I got to tell you, I was even skeptical when they were telling me that this was the problem. And it was like a very unique problem. I would have never guessed, that was the issue. But as a consumer, I was pleased with the outcome because it was pretty seamless. And again, you may work on a different side of the business than this experience that I'm relating. But I think just from a customer standpoint, that was a pretty good outcome. And I totally agree with you that there's a lot of friction in that industry, and you're probably going to win a lot more customers by reducing that friction.
Yeah, it's really similar to what you experienced. You want to bring transparency in. So if you would have gone to an individual who would have told you that you need to get this work done and wouldn't have told you exactly why, and just like, well, we do this, we bring you a new battery in, and your alternator had to be done too, and you wouldn't have had any correlation of why this is actually happening, most certainly would have come out of this experience with a complete different mindset. So you experience the top of the crop of what's out there, which are shops who are willing to share to the customer the journey they have to go through, the repair experience they have to create, and as well as also the craftsmanship which is behind it. And I think that's really what we want to bring towards an end consumer. We are building software solutions which give you a certain level of transparency as a consumer to educate yourself while also making decisions on how much care you give to the asset you're actually owning. And at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. The experience of an individual car owner has multiple phases. You go through the honeymoon phase where you love that car because everything works. And then you get everything done by the dealership because it's all within warranty, within maintenance cycles, and you really don't have to spend too much money to get the asset going. But then you hit that your post-honeymoon, post the first few years of really loving this asset to, now it's becoming actually something I have to take care of more often. I have to manage more often. And then you want to manage it with the best care so you can prolong the life of this asset as long as possible. And that's what we're really striving for. We're striving for to give you, to show you the value you put into repairs on the car.
Yep. And that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of that, in the industry, and starting out in a coronavirus mindset, what type of changes are you seeing? Even say from how you work, and then maybe on a demand side, and then maybe even on a product or ideation side?
Sure. So from how we work, I would say the biggest difference in our case is I have a team of individuals, consultants who are out on the street on a daily basis, working with our network of workshops on giving them the best advice and transforming them into the next business stage. These guys usually walk into a shop where they have an appointment with. This is a person they know, an owner they know, and they know by the first second what's the state of affairs when walking into the door. Now this is all transformed. Now we have to pick up the phone. The state of affairs can be anything. It can be from fear to kind of like almost completely shut down. But it also can be the state of affair of change is happening. I need to be here. I need to be making the change now. Now I have an opportunity. So it really changed from us of how we are approaching these individuals. And a lot of it is about empathy. It's not about how to change their feelings. It's about listening to their feelings and listening to their challenges. In this situation you have with COVID, is everyone has their own challenges. Everyone is affected differently. I'm personally affected with it as much as you're personally affected with it. And we all need to deal with that overall challenge separately and understand that as brands, as organizations, we do not have the power to change people's mindsets, but we have the power of being empathetic and real at this time.
And that's from a sales perspective with the clients, and that changes how you're communicating because you're having to hop on a phone instead of seeing them in person. And,
yep.
And I imagine, that's not better, unfortunately. And it's maybe hard for some of your customers or to convert them over to video calls, maybe, I'm guessing. So that probably changes that aspect also.
Yeah, we are talking to thousands individual business owners who are facing challenges such as layoffs, such as closing shop for a couple of weeks, such as complete iteration of the customer base, such as no changes at all because their community is not affected yet. But we as a corporation made the choice to take our people offline, in the sense of online, but off the street, really early on, because we were really concerned that this is spreading really fast, and we didn't want to have our team exposed to any of the risks out there. So that means that we also had to change in how we market and how we approach people. And I think it's not the time to sell; it's a time to listen and to be an ear and a support system towards our customers. Because at the end of the day, everyone is facing different challenges.
In the industry specifically, I think it's essential, right? So the shops, I believe, are all staying open.
Correct.
People are driving their cars less, so they're probably seeing a little bit of a demand hit. Is that kind of a quick overview?
Absolutely. I mean, it's an essential industry, but you can imagine that if shelter-in-place orders, people are not really going outside. And then we have a massive economic hit, as we all know. So the repair of your asset at this point in time might not be front of mind, especially if you're working from home or if you just lost your job because your business had to close because it was not deemed essential. So that said, the demand in the market definitely was immediately hit. And therefore, shops had to make decisions considering their environment of where they're in. And with such a big country as we have here, we have this COVID-19 affect each community differently. And we see that.
And from your end on the marketing side, how would you advise other businesses? Obviously, they could be totally different types of companies than the one you're working within. But how would you advise them to change or adapt in this time? I mean, maybe that's from a marketing perspective or call to action perspective or something else that you might have in mind. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I would look at it differently. I mean, the call to action right now, it might not be the best idea to go to benefit from what we are going through with a call to action.
Yep.
From a marketing perspective, I would take this time to really understand my customer better. This is the first time you can go into a virtual experience with your customer where you just listen and understand their business and understand their concern as well as understand their ups and downs, because some customers might be really opportunistic about what's going on right now because they haven't been affected by it. Others might be heavily affected by it. So I think as a marketeer, for one, it's almost a call to listen and not a call to action. And with that call to listen, you will learn much more than what your CRM tells you about the customer, because before you always send in with exact notions of what you want to learn from that customer. This time it's going to, let's see what the customer wants to tell me, because I don't really have a choice. If I'm coming in with a sales pitch, most certainly the phone will be as quickly hung up as it was picked up.
Absolutely. And it's just, a lot of customers and a lot of business owners are shutting everything off because there's a lot of fear. So, your answer makes a lot of sense. People don't want to make a new decision right now. They don't want to make any decision except, critical to their business. And I guess that gives, like you said, it's a time to listen. But with that in mind, has that caused you to think of any new types of products or different types of needs for the customers? Because I guess the reason I bring it up is I think a lot of folks think this might be, a V-shaped recovery. And I'm looking at the science of it, and I think it's going to be a lot longer. It doesn't mean it's always going to be like it is now, but I think, we're talking longer either until there's a vaccine, which is not on the short term, or until there's herd immunity, which is not on the short term. And without either of those two things, people are going to keep getting infected, or we're going to stay locked down. And that would lead, to potentially a lot longer than what everybody's thinking. Everybody's planning, hey, Q3, we're going to be all back in business 100%. And I'm not so certain about that. And kind of with that in mind, I think it's smart for companies to think about products, not in a way of taking advantage of it, but just in serving customers, because customer needs may be different and even in some cases permanently different. But in a lot of cases, there's going to be different needs coming up for the customer. And I'm curious if you have had a chance to have any thoughts or new product ideas on that end.
I mean, selfishly said, it's kind of, we're kind of being pushed into the digitalization at this point in time. If you think, everyone has always been talking about that businesses have to become more digital. Businesses have to become enabled with new technology. And now we are at that point where you don't really have a choice. If you're not digitally enabled, you're not going to be able to serve the customers at this point in time. And I think it really, when I look at a product and I look at what's next, I think we really have to go down the route of how can we make an experience still be human while being digital. And more than ever now, if you think about solutions which have come out in the past few years, digitalization has a lot been about automation, about having someone else do the job a human does. At this point in time, I'm pretty sure no one of us wants to talk to a robot on the phone, especially because we're all hit with a lot of hardship. So that said, it's almost humanizing the technology to a factor where digital will enable you to do better business in the future with still a human touch. So I think it really will help us to look at these experiences now from our own experience, because we are not sitting in a boardroom with whiteboards and markers and we are trying to solve for something. We are not being able to like prototype right on the spot and look each other over the shoulders. We have to have that certain confidence in our teams that they will innovate and they will come out of this with a different notion. So I would say the human aspect of it is really giving me a different point of view on how we want to innovate products in the future.
Oh, that's a great answer. And there's a lot in that answer. The simple way that kind of reflects or relates to the audience, and keep in mind, the audience here is a lot of houseware and hardware businesses, a lot of them. And, a lot of these companies, kind of to your point, but a lot of these companies rely on the channel. So they rely on the physical stores, or they rely on the online channels. And truthfully, a lot of them don't have a direct customer connection. They don't even have a direct to consumer experience for their customers. And I think now more than ever, just kind of tagging along on your comment there, this is the time to do it, because first of all, you can control your brand when you have that D2C experience, but you're not relying on a channel. And right now, a lot of channels are getting hit hard, and customers still are looking for that experience. And, Amazon's great, but they're not going to give your customer the full experience that you're able to get direct to consumer on your own website selling product. And just for the audience listening, kind of going along with your point, I would definitely encourage everyone to look that direction.
Yeah, exactly. I would really fully agree with you. Now it's the time, because you only have one channel.
Yeah.
Unless you're in groceries, you only have one channel, which is the digital channel. So now it's the time to humanize it, to be more personal with your marketing, to be more personal with your outreach, and to actually be there when someone has a question. You wouldn't believe how many times still now people wait too long because our customer service channels, which are out there in retail, weren't set up for that amount of demand, which comes through digital. Because they were all set up that people are walking into the store. If they don't get an answer right away, oh, well, I just go to the store, they will give me an answer at the cashier. Well, then guess what? Now you don't have the cashier, which is actually giving you an answer. Now you have to have the people in the back office writing down what the answer is to their customer's complaint or customer's request. So I think it really shows us the importance that there's still a human there at the time when there is a need, and not just a mailbox which is being filtered through at the end of the day by one person.
No, that's a great question. And just to talk on it, to give specifics for the audience here. So for New Air, what we tried to do, or what it was a goal. We haven't achieved it yet, but we tried to have as many chats as phone calls. And we tried to direct customers there because, we all looked at ourselves and we like a chat as long as we get a quick response. And so setting up KPIs within call centers and tracking response times and keeping response times under 15 seconds so it's a good experience. And then you might say, well, how do you convert more people to chat than call? You just make chat really easy. I mean, you got to go on your website and say, how do we make it so easy that customers would rather just type a few words here? And I think, it's like you go to self-checkout at a grocery store and you need a PhD to figure it out. So you got to make things really easy. And, to your point, a lot of call centers and getting a hold of companies just to ask a question is difficult now. And so I think that can be on everybody's mind as well, for the brand owners that are listening. So JP, looking through a little bit more of the profile and what I learned about you, it looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you're involved in what I might call partner marketing. Do you describe it the same way? Because you're doing it's kind of like you're finding the right partners to create disruption.
Partner venturing, I will call it. I will call it partner venturing. So basically what we're doing, we're finding partners where we can venture together to build solutions which overlap. So basically create a Venn diagram of partners where the multiple of the circles which meet in the middle gives you a much higher value than just one circle independently.
And this is, I don't know if you know him, Jay Abraham is like a marketing extraordinaire. He's maybe a generation back, but he's written a lot of great books, and his whole thing is partnering with folks. Are you able to give an example? Maybe you are not able to give a company a specific one, but maybe just so the audience can kind of understand how this might look more in a tangible way.
Sure. I mean, for example, when we work with a marketing services company who provides us a certain tool so we can outreach to our audience through all of the channels we have out there. Give you an example, a company named Sprinkler, which is a customer engagement tool. What we try to do is always look at the tool and the capability of the tool, but we also heavily steer ourselves in solving problems of our current business. So we're not just solving the problem the tool is supposed to solve, but we are working with these companies to find solutions which are general business problems. Because I think that the most of the times when you buy tools, you're just buying a Band-Aid. You're not buying something which is actually enabling you to do better business. So you're trying a lot of times to really go from a problem-solving perspective and say, okay, what are the general business problems we have to solve? And when we look at the framework of what this tool is set up to do, can we solve our business with a similar framework, just with the intelligence of the tool, which the tool might have not been set up for? So, for example, we prototype through simple search listening as well as social listening. So what we do is, instead of saying like, okay, we want to solve a certain customer problem, I would say like the business book value proposition modeling, where you look at pains and gains. We basically say, okay, let's look in general of what are people talking about when they do something, which has nothing to do with our product. So we look at, for example, of what are people talking about when they go on trips? What are the problems they're facing? And with that, you start to find trends, which you then can see if one of our products could solve that problem, which you weren't aware of that actually happens in the category. So you're going away from like just going into focus groups and starting to ask the customers of what the problems are to then solve that problem after the focus group, in going into the overall journey of the customer. And when they are maybe using our product, which they're not talking about, but they're experiencing something during the use, which is not completely related to our product. So trying to leverage these kind of information points and going towards the route of I would call it, partnering with the right organization who is also willing to learn from your problems has helped us a lot to innovate quicker and also a bit more focused on the outside and less onto our inside. Does that make sense?
I love that. It makes total sense. And I got a couple of follow-up questions on that, and I just think that this is it's very usable, for the audience that's here. What tool is that? The Sprinkler? Is that Sprinkler? Is that the tool you're using for that listening?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and I've seen them. And what does it take from a resource perspective? I mean, does this take a lot of people to have to sort through messages, or does that software actually, put it all together and make it easy from a company resource side?
So I'm not trying to do advertising here for these guys, but I would say like where I said you need to be more human earlier, I would say that's where automation really helps you. And they're very highly automated, so you don't need too much overhead.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I mean, that sounds like a really big breakthrough tool, because that is tough. Like, everyone's always looking for new product ideas. The problem is we always think of it from our own needs, when you're absolutely right. We have to be listening to the customer and seeing what they're talking about. And you probably have a higher, conversion rate of successful products than if you guys, just came up with things that were coming to your own mind. So I can definitely see how that's useful. And I guess that's what you would call passive listening.
Correct. Exactly. So instead of listening for certain cases, let's say like I'm listening for a car being broken on the side of the road, that's active listening, because I'm listening to something which has an impact to what my business is doing, because my business, like Bosch Automotive Aftermarket, our business makes one thing. We're keeping cars on the road because we are doing great parts. You're building fantastic products so your car can stay longer on the road. But what we are looking at is, when it comes to passive listening, we are looking at what are people doing? So instead of like a car being broken down, we are talking about road trips. We are talking about driving at night, talking about fogged up windshields. Not even that's already active, but we're really looking at actions from point A to point P, and less at like what's actually breaking down. So more of the good experiences, so we can see, because most of the people share just as many good experiences as they share bad experiences. And from the good experience, you can learn what opportunities you have. For example, if someone says that they're driving lots at night, and whenever they're driving and it's raining outside, they have a really hard time to see, and it's really blurry, and the headlights on the other side make it really hard for them to see out of their windshield. That can spur a product idea, and at Bosch, it spurred the product idea of the Bosch Envision and Bosch Focus Wiper Blade, which have actually both night vision technology, which reduces the blur on the windshield. A little bit PSA here, but that's what we did at that point.
Wow. And I can relate to that. I was actually driving through a blizzard in Utah for a little ski trip, and I couldn't see anything. I was like, I must have the worst headlights on this car. But but nothing broke down. So if there would be no way for a company to know this pain, because there wasn't any event, but if someone's talking about that on social media, then they didn't actually have a car problem, but you found out about it anyways because they talked about it. And are you able to guess on how many product innovations come from active listening versus passive, like percentage wise? Is it more?
It's hard to guess.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you focus on the current problem, and you don't really focus on the problem which could be there. And that's, I would say for us, we have a good balance on giving feedback to our product marketing to really look at this from both ends of the side. And I would say it's still, I don't know how many companies are actively using that kind of a methodology. We have been using it for 3-4 years now, but I couldn't tell you if anyone else and how they use it. Because every business has other challenges, other journeys they're looking for in the customers.
Yeah, definitely. And JP, I mean, it's been an interesting interview, because I've talked to a lot of marketing people, but not the way that you think. You think in a very innovative and different way, and you come at things from a different perspective. And I guess just to finish up this interview, is there, maybe even if it gets tactical, but is there something you would advise, small and mid-sized business owners or marketers or CMOs on how to think differently? Like, is there, one or two things that you think they may not be doing but could be doing?
I would say, for me, when I think about small, medium business owners, if you do something, do it right. Don't just do it to be there. Too many times I encounter people who say, I do social media, but all they do is posting a picture once a week, and they call it social media. Social media is an exchange between individual and the corporation when it comes to our space where we are in as businesses. So you want to be just as approachable as an organization as an individual is approachable by their friends. And when I say do it right and don't do it, I mean is that also don't just post pictures to show blatantly your product, because too many companies have done that on social media, and that's why there's always a new platform forming, because people are hoping that this platform doesn't have as many public service announcements as the last platform had. And that said, like, if you're staying authentic, if you're staying real, and if you're also staying relevant to your customers. And with relevancy, I don't mean that the marketer should now start posting about COVID-19. I think that's what we have our government for, to inform us about. But relevancy means solving problems which are real, and not just solving problems which are a feature and benefit on your product roadmap. And I would say the second part I would say is, if you're out there and if you're digital, be available. The worst customer experience is, I have a website, I have an e-commerce shop, and I type on the chat message window, which is on the button, which is a fantastic plugin, which is super cheap and everyone can put on. and it tells me that there's currently no customer service agent available, or my hours are just during Eastern Standard Time until 4 p.m. Guess what? People don't shop during business hours. They shop after they're done with work. We don't have time nowadays to shop during business hours. So I think be available when the customer is online and not just when your business is open.
Well, that's a great one right there. And it's so easy to do that now too, because I'm probably going to go look at how we're doing it on chat. I know we've extended our hours, but we have a remote team and they're in a different time zone. And these are things that we can do now, and people can have, they can have people from all over the world maybe managing chat at different times. So I think it's a great answer. And I've learned a lot. I've taken a lot of notes. So really appreciate you coming on the Page One podcast, JP. How can folks get a hold of you if they'd like to follow up with you?
On LinkedIn. It's simple. LinkedIn.com/JP Persico. You should find me. No problem.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being a guest on the Page One podcast. And just want to remind the audience that we're offering a free evaluation from Retail Band. If you need help on your digital strategy and you want to sell more, especially right now, into Amazon, Home Depot, Wayfair, Walmart, and all of those other channels, get a hold of us. Find me at luke@retailband.com. And I hope you all have really enjoyed the interview today. Truly appreciate all of your reviews on iTunes and hope to see you on the next interview.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our other segments. Also, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to learn more about our commerce? Check out www.retailband.com to get more great tips and tricks on how to accelerate your e-commerce sales with the big box retailers.